All right. Let's do. So right now I'm just going to set up a few things for the project before I get into the tutorial. So I'm just going to set up some basic movement for the player and stuff like that. So yeah, don't worry about it too much. Let's see. Let's move. Okay. Do. Let me move my keyboard or something. Hello. Let's do times 4. Let's do times 5. It's gonna be Y. B input. Be the same thing. B. So none of this is planned out, so that's why I'm kind of rushing to get this set up right now, so I don't have to be doing it and boring people. Oh. Okay. Door slammed. Up. Okay. This should be good enough. Let's make a quick room. Let's drag. Oh. That was not what I wanted. I didn't set up my sprites. Player. Oh, enemy. Set up our enemies. Player. Set up a couple enemies here. All right. Group entities. Ooh, they didn't go in the folder. There we go. Okay, so let's do play area, rooms, creates. Let's do a main menu. Let's do loading screen. Okay, that one before our play area. Cool. Sweet. All right. Do I have a viewer right now, or is that me? I don't know if it shows that I'm watching myself. Okay. Got 5 minutes. All right, and if you're watching this not live, just wait 5 minutes or skip ahead 5 minutes if you've made it this far, and I'll be getting into the tutorial. I'm going to be trying to do this as you're not watching it live, because I'm sure there's going to be way more people watching it after I do this video than there are during my live stream. So I'll be trying to make this friendly to use, so I'll be going a little bit fast and trying not to be too slow. So if you are live and you're typing in the chat, I'm sorry if I don't get to you. As I said, this just isn't going to be an organized thing. I figured I'd make it live in case I had any questions, and I know I haven't been around, so if someone pops up, they could say hi. So that's what I'm doing, and I also don't have time to edit and render the video, and streaming live, it's just going to put it online for me. Awesome. Okay. And my lighting's not set up and everything, so I'll get that going soon, all right? Don't worry about it too much. So I got my controllers. Okay. Trying to think of how I want to go through this. Let's do scripts. I'm going to go ahead and make some folders for the scripts. Call one entities. Same structure as I have down here. Add group controllers. This is generally how I set things up, and then I'm going to add a group like enemies. I may not have scripts for all this, but so let's create a group, call it AI managers. Okay, cool. Hey, what's up? Oh, it doesn't show you what anyone was watching. Not much, man. I'm trying to do a quick stream. I know I haven't had time to make videos. As you can see, I'm in a new place. And as you see, I'm in the living room. So I don't really have a lot of privacy to make videos right now. Hopefully that'll be changing in a month or two. Maybe 3. I don't know. We'll see. I may end up moving, hopefully somewhere that has 3 bedrooms so I can have an office. But so I figured I'd do an impromptu stream to go over a couple things that I've been discovering and kind of been applying to a project I'm working on right now. And I'm working on 2 projects right now, and just some stuff that I found really useful. And probably not a lot of information on the stuff I'm going to go over today as far as GameMaker goes. They're kind of have to do with design patterns, and design patterns don't really exist in the GameMaker community because there's not a lot of information on it. And GameMaker is kind of teaches you some bad ways to do things, and so you don't ever really think about, hey, if I have an error, maybe I want GameMaker to tell me. A lot of GameMaker developers, we try to get around errors, like, oh, if an error is going to pop up here, I just want to ignore it. But that's not really how you handle errors in programming. When you run into an error, you want to tell yourself as much information about that error as possible, and then that'll allow you to debug it easier and fix it instead of having something not work and then have to debug it through the debugger. So you kind of want to bring the errors to the forefront, and that's going to be one of the things I go over today. And then the second thing I'm going to go over is, like it says, is kind of an AI director. I'll kind of show you what I mean about that. I'm not really going to show you how to implement the AI director, but show you a basic game setup, building like a game framework. So stream's going to start in 20 seconds actually, and I'm going to get into exactly what I'm going to be doing. So yeah. So let me go into it then. All right, so if you skipped ahead, if you're not live, hello, I'm back, kind of. I know I haven't been around. I'm in a new place, not as much privacy right now to make videos, so not a big deal. Eventually I might, me and my girlfriend might end up moving, and then I'll be able to make videos better. But I had some time tonight, so I'm going to do a live stream, and I'm going to be going over some basic game framework setup. So this is kind of important, and people don't do it. So when you first set up a game, most of you probably have a play area room here, okay? And this is where you just put in your player sprite, you put in your character sprites, and you start hammering away at the code, getting your movement and stuff. And then you run into issues where you have to put in a controller. Maybe you have some kind of controller for your game, and then you have to open up the room, and you have to make sure that its instance creation order is correct, so your controller can be initialized in your room. And then when it comes time to implement room changing, now all of a sudden you have a new issue. You have to figure out how you're going to transition rooms, how you're going to save or move the player to a new position in the next room, and then you're putting player sprites and player objects in each room and having to put controllers in each room, and it's kind of messy. So I'm going to give you a way from, I guess, ground zero, how you should set up your game before you even start making it, that will make these transitions when you start getting deeper into your game more smooth. And these can be applied to anything. If you're prototyping, if you're going straight into making a big game, if you do these things first, it's guaranteed to make your game more organized and easier. Okay, so the first thing I want to go over, I went ahead and created some objects and set up some folders and stuff, is the player. Now, as you can see here, when people start making their games, they start getting these inputs, right? So you put your input inside your player character. So you're grabbing your keyboard checks, you're grabbing your, if you have mouse checks, you're grabbing your mouse checks, and this is kind of against a design pattern that's pretty common in programming, which is the single responsibility pattern. So basically, every object you have, you want to execute as closely as possible, only want it to handle one responsibility. Hey, what's up, Helder? Sorry, I'm gonna... my tutorials will come, but this is one. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna read your comments. I'm gonna continue. Or your chat. Game Maker both is better tool to teach programming over Unity. If you're just trying to teach programming, actually, I'm going to come back to questions because I'm going to do this. So if people are watching this after the stream's over, I'm not answering questions the whole time, but I promise I'll answer if you stick around. So stick around. Okay, so back on topic. So this is what we usually do. We get the keyboard inputs, and you handle your inputs. I'm back, sorry, I got backtracked to the single responsibility pattern. So we want every object in our game to try to have one responsibility only, okay? And everything I'm going to be talking about in this tutorial is kind of going to hold on to that rule as much as possible. So the first thing I want to do is extract this responsibility of the player. It has to check for keyboard inputs, and it has to keep track of this different stuff. And now what happens if you have a gamepad? Now all of a sudden your step event for your player has to keep track of gamepad inputs as well. And that's kind of messy when you just want your player to worry about its movement and its actions. So what we could do is create a manager, and this is going to be a manager object. And for manager naming patterns, I kind of stopped using the O in front of it because they don't have sprites, so there's no reason to try to distinguish it necessarily. So for a manager that handles input, I just call it input manager. All right. And then I go into its create event, and I set these variables like I have in my player right here. I'll set it to, let's say, init input variables. Well, the first thing I do is do keyboard assignments. So I'm going to try to keep this quick because this is only a tiny piece of what I want to go over right now. So I'm going to manage keyboard inputs. So I have left, right, up, and down as my keys. Okay. So I'm going to say up key assign equals VK up. Okay. And then I'm going to do down key assign equals VK down and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to copy paste. Cool. And why do I do this? Well, now it's super easy for me to change. I'm going to do right and left. Super easy to change what keys that you want mapped. So now when we do our keyboard checks, which I'm going to copy paste this down here, actually in the step event. Okay, update key checks. So now when we are doing our logic for our inputs, we can insert here. So I have up assign key. So I do that instead of VK up. Oh, shoot. Up assign key. And this stuff I've kind of went over in my other tutorials. Don't worry, I have some new stuff upcoming. I'm just trying to go over initial game setup right now. Because I'm going to show some pretty cool stuff actually. And it may seem not so exciting, but it's really going to help you keep your game organized. Okay, so now we've set our H input. This is our input manager, and our V input. And this is going to be return a value between 0 and 1, which corresponds with gamepad input actually, if you're using gamepad. So you can kind of use the same logic. Here you would do if gamepad, what's the function for it connected, is connected, 0. And if it is connected, you can do your gamepad input, and if it's not, you could do your keyboard input. Easy as that. But use these same H and V input variables, okay? So now I have my basic inputs, and I have my H input, my V input. Again, this is going to be between -1 and 1, because we're doing right key assign, that would be 1, minus left key assign. If that key is being pressed, it would be -1. So you're doing 1 minus 1, which if you're holding both keys down, it's 0. Anyway, doesn't matter. Let's go straight into the next piece. So I get my keyboard inputs. Now here, instead of having these values, I use input manager dot H input, input manager dot V input. Okay. Now this does a couple things for us. We took away the responsibility of our player to keep track of inputs, and now we know exactly where these variables are initialized. So when our game gets bigger and we want to change stuff, it's in my input manager. I hit F1, takes us straight there. Now all of our keyboard stuff's right here. It's not entangled in our messy player step event, okay? So that is kind of step 1, is make an input manager. Set your inputs here, and then you can map to them from here. Now, the next problem we run into, now we have to have an input manager created inside of our game, okay? And you may just go into your play area, drag your input manager in here, and then you have to make sure the instance creation order is correct so the player isn't trying to access the variables from the input manager on its create before it's even made, before the controller's even existing in the room. But I'm gonna go against that. Don't do that. And this brings me to my next big piece. I'm gonna go ahead and delete that out. So we're gonna make a loading screen right from the beginning of your game. Before you work on anything, make a loading screen and then your play area. Loading screen will be the first thing in your game. And eventually when you put a main menu in, it'll go before your loading screen. A loading screen is where all your objects are going to be initialized. All your data is going to be cached. If you're wanting to build like a lot of data inside of your game, like you're saving or you're loading from a file and mapping data from that file to different objects, this will all be done in the loading screen. And after all that's complete, then the loading screen will automatically go to a specific room. So we're going to go ahead and make a loading screen, which will be the first thing we do inside of our game. Okay, so I made the loading screen already. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make another controller. So I go under my controllers, I have my input manager. And we're going to make a new manager called, it's going to be called, let's say, game initializer. Okay? And this is going to initialize everything we want initialized during the loading screen, okay? Now, bear with me, you're about to see the reason for this and why it's pretty useful. So, our game initializer, we know, is going to initialize our objects. Now, you may be wondering, well, why are we initializing stuff in the loading screen? Aren't we going to have to reinitialize it in the play area? Well, no, because we're going to set all these objects to persistent, okay? And we're going to do some type safety in this. And what that means is we're going to make sure this is as safe as possible. So if you make another manager and you need it initialized at runtime, your game will let you know if it's not set up right. Right when the game starts, it's going to throw you a message and it's going to say, hey, this isn't set up correctly. You might want to change something and set it up correctly. This is going to allow you to know right away what's wrong, and it's going to prevent you from wondering, let's say your input manager didn't get put in and for some reason it's not throwing errors at you and you can't move your guy around because your input manager doesn't exist or some other object controller doesn't exist. It's going to tell you. So how are we going to do all this stuff? This seems really complicated, but bear with me and know that it's super important to start right. Okay, start your game correctly and set this framework up, and it's really, really going to help you. So let's get straight into the game initializer code. Okay, so when we're on our game initializer here, this is going to go into our loading screen. I'm going to go ahead and put it there so I don't forget. Game initializer. This is the only object that we were putting in our loading screen, okay? So we put our initializer inside of our loading screen. And now what do we want this to do? Well, we want it to create our input manager, all right? So all we're going to do is, oh shoot, no, not right now, man. Dang, my friend that never plays games with me wants to play right now. Don't worry about it. Anyway, okay, so we have our game initializer that we're going to put on our loading screen. It's going to initialize our input manager. So we could just do instance create input manager, but I don't really like that. Let's make it better. Remember, we want to do type checks. And what are we checking for? What kind of type are we checking for? Well, nothing yet. So this brings me to another design pattern called the singleton pattern, where some objects you only want one instance of, and you want that instance to be accessed from everywhere. Well, every object in GameMaker is accessible from anywhere. You can see that here. I can just access Input Manager as long as it exists in my room. But we still only want one instance of Input Manager, right? We don't want two of them to accidentally be created. We would never notice, first of all, and depending on what type of controller you have, it could be causing issues with your game, and you wouldn't even know why, because you might have two controllers both apply some force to an object, and you're wondering why your object is moving twice the speed that it's supposed to, and maybe it's because you have two of the controllers existing in a room at a time, and you just don't know. And it's kind of impossible to tell unless you're debugging and you see it. So we can prevent that by creating a parent called a singleton. So I'm going to create an object. I'm going to call it a singleton. And this is a design pattern. Look it up. It doesn't really, there's not anything in GameMaker for it, but it's a programming design pattern, software development design pattern. And it works in GameMaker as well. So what do we want from our singleton? And if you don't know how parents work, basically, I'm going to show you, but objects can inherit from a parent object, okay? And it kind of inherits its properties, and you can actually use an object, you can check to see what type its parent is, or to see if it's the child of a certain object. And if it is, then you can take action, and we're about to do that. So our singleton, we only want one. So in our create event for our singleton, what we're going to put is, do we actually need anything in the create event? Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place right now. I'm going to leave the create event out for now. Nope, we aren't leaving it out. So when a singleton is created, I'm going to go ahead and open up my input manager and assign the singleton as its parent, okay? So you do that by going to parent. I have input manager open, and I'm going to assign the singleton as its parent, okay? And now when our input manager is created in our game, it is a singleton, okay? That's how children work. The input manager is a singleton because that's its parent. And if something inherits from input manager, if you make another object and make its parent input manager, that object will be an input manager and it will be a singleton. That's just how the type hierarchy goes. So now our input manager, since its parent is singleton, it is singleton. And what does that mean? Well, we can put some code in here in this singleton. And what this code's going to do is check on its create if there's another object of the same type. And if so, it's going to destroy itself. This ensures that we only have one object of its type. So how do we do that? We do if instance number, and we can read the instance number takes in a parameter object, and we just pass in object index to this is less than 1. Is it less than 1? Let's say is not greater than 1. So actually, that's the same thing. I'm not positive if this instance number increases during the create event or in the next step. So we're gonna have to experiment with this, but we're gonna stick with is less than 1 right now. So if no other object of this type exists in the room on its create event, then it's fine. But if, let's do is greater than 1. There we go. This makes more sense. If the amount of objects of this type in our room is greater than 1, then we want to destroy it. Destroy this ourself, and I'll kind of give you a demonstration of how this works in a second. So let's go through what's going to happen now. Our singleton's going to be created, and this code's going to fail because there aren't more than 1 in the room. And if this singleton if something's trying to create another instance of this singleton, so if another create event runs, this is going to say, yes, it's true, there's more than 1, and it's going to destroy itself. So no matter how hard you try, you can never have 2 of these objects, okay? And of course, this is the singleton parent. And how do we make sure that our child object executes this code? Well, let's go to our game initializer, which is our child object, and its parents. Oh, not game initializer, sorry. Our input manager. And its parent is singleton, okay? And before anything else, we just type in event inherited. And what this does is, since this is called in the create event, it calls its parent's create event. So you call this, and now it's going to call this, okay? Awesome. And now, since the singleton's its parent, it calls this. If there's 2 input managers, it's going to destroy itself. You see how it works. Now, if we create another manager, which we're going to do for room transitions. So, okay, if you're just joining in, what I'm doing is showing you how to set up a framework for a game to make sure everything runs smoothly, so you're not getting multiple instances of controllers, and you don't have to deal with that annoyance of every room you create. You have to make sure you put your controller object in the room, make sure you put these certain objects in the room. I'm going to show you a way that in your loading screen, the first room that plays on your game is just a blank loading screen. It initializes everything, and the rest of your game runs smooth, and you don't ever have to place controller objects again because this loading screen is going to take care of everything for you. So the first thing I did was create a singleton object, which is just a parent. It's just a parent singleton pattern. Look it up. It's just a parent, and then the input manager is its child, and now any controller we want is its child. Input manager takes care of the input, and you can see in my player event that I'm grabbing the variables from that input manager. So in the step event, it's assigning the variables. I'm grabbing them using input manager.hinput, which follows the first pattern I talked about, which is the single responsibility pattern. Every object in your game should only have one responsibility. The input manager's responsibility is to manage keyboard, mouse, gamepad input. Our singleton is responsible for making sure there's only one of whatever type of object it is. Okay, so let's make a new controller. This is going to be your room manager, or you can call it transition manager or scene manager if you use Unity. So we're going to use room manager, okay? And what this is going to do is take care of transitioning to different rooms. It's going to keep track of the previous room you were in. It's going to keep track of maybe a map of all the rooms you've been in. So it keeps track, like if you have a big explorable world, it'll keep track of all the rooms that you visited. And this will handle all that, okay? So you have your room manager and your game initializer. I'm gonna put the your input manager. And I'm gonna put these in order of kind of how they're created in the game. So singleton, and then we have our game initializer, and then our room manager, okay? And we're gonna set up our room manager now. We want it to be a singleton as well. So what do? We open up parent, and we put singleton as its parent. Now, what if we forget to do something? What if we go in here and put our create event and initialize a variable, okay? Let's say variable equals 0. Hey guys, thank you for everyone saying welcome back. I'm sorry, this isn't going to be a super exciting video, but it's really important stuff, so try to keep up with it and try to take some lessons from it. Watch it a few times if you don't fully understand the reasoning, but I promise you it's going to help. And if you stick around for the end of this video, you'll kind of see exactly what it does and how awesome it is, okay? So, all right, so we set up a new manager. Let's say you're just a few days later, you need a new manager, a new controller. Some people call them controllers. I call them managers, okay? Because they're managing things, or they're controlling things, same thing. So I have my room manager now, okay? And I initialized a variable in here. We're not going to do anything else with it yet, okay? So, cool. I initialized a variable, but I forgot to do my inherited event. So it's not calling the singleton's create event. And remember, the singleton's create event makes sure that if this room manager tries to get instantiated or created, and there's already a room manager existing, then it'll just destroy itself instead of staying created, okay? So I haven't called the parent's create event, so it's not going to destroy itself. And I'm going to do this on purpose to show you kind of what we can do to prevent this from accidentally happening. Because right now, this could accidentally happen, so the singleton's not doing us any good if a few days later you make a manager and you forget to type the event inherited function. Yeah. So we put our game initializer in our loading screen. Cool. And right now it's not initializing anything, so let's set it to initialize something. Okay. So we can either type out instance create and layer for GameMaker Studio 2, and we can create all of the different controllers that we want to keep track of. Or what we can do is create a kind of data structure to keep track of these, and the data structure will take care of creating everything. But first, let's go ahead and do it your way, because I'm sure many of you would just do it like this. Instances is the default layer in GMS Studio 2, and we're going to create our input manager. Okay. Remember, this is all happening in our loading screen room. And I'll go over how this is going to translate to the other rooms in a minute. Okay. So we have our instance create layer, and we're creating our input manager. Awesome. Well, right now, we're not checking to see if this input manager is set up correctly, right? Because now we can do, first off, I want to show you exactly what happens if you try to create two of them, all right? So we have our input manager. I'm going to try to create two, okay? And let's see. When the input manager detects that there is a second one, since it's calling event inherited from singleton, it should destroy itself, okay? So in our singleton destroy event, so I went back to singleton, on its destroy event, we're just gonna show a message to say that we've been destroyed. Show message, and we're gonna do object get name. This is going to tell us what object destroyed itself. Remember, the child of singleton, that'll be the object name. So singleton won't actually be the name. So we're going to do object get name, object index, and then that's going to return a string, and then we're going to say destroyed itself. Okay. So did I set it up? I missed something. There we go. Awesome. So this is in the destroy event of singleton, and the way children work is unless, okay, so here we don't have a destroy event in our input manager. We don't have a destroy event, so it's going to use its parent's destroy event, and the parent is singleton. So on this object's destroy, input manager's destroy, it's going to execute the singleton's destroy code. But the reason we had to use event inherited on the create is because if you make an event, it's going to use this object's create event unless you say this. This event inherited is going to say, hey, go to my parent and call its create event. So it's going to come here and call this, and then it's going to continue with the rest of this code. All right. So now we're going to be shown a message anytime the input manager gets destroyed, okay? And we're trying to create 2 of them on our game initializer. And remember, our game initializer is on our loading screen. So we should get a message that pops up saying this object's been destroyed. So let's run it. There you go. Destroyed itself. So it took care of itself. We don't want 2 of them. There's no reason to have 2 input managers. Or any controllers, there's never a reason to have 2. That's why we're using the singleton pattern. So it destroyed itself. Okay. Input manager right assign key is not initialized. So let's go to our input manager. Messed up on a variable. These keys, right assign key. Oh, it's right key assign. Oh man. I don't want to. I'm gonna have to do this real quick, guys. Sorry. I put the key in the assign backwards. Assign key. Assign key. Yeah, I'll answer all your guys' questions in about 30 minutes, okay? Don't worry. Key. Assign key. There we go. We shouldn't get error now. Okay, so now when we run the game, the first room manager gets created. The second room manager gets destroyed when it tries to get created, okay? Input manager destroyed itself. Awesome. Only one of them destroyed itself, okay? Now what happens if we accidentally try to initialize 4? Okay? We should get 3 error messages because we only want 1 alive at a time. All right? Boom, boom, boom. We got 3 messages. 3 of them destroyed themselves. Perfect. That's what we wanted. Now, our new manager also inherited from the singleton parents. And what was that manager called? It was called room manager. Manager. And if you're just joining, managers are controllers. We're trying to limit. We're trying to make it to where 2 controllers will never exist at a time because that's bad and it happens a lot. And also we're trying to get rid of the pain of having to go into each room and place a controller every time you make a new room. So now we're making through 3 room managers, and they too, as you see, inherited from parent, or inherited from singleton. But we didn't call the event inherited script, okay? Or we didn't call the event inherited function. So it's not actually calling the singleton's create event. So it's actually not going to destroy itself, or it shouldn't. And if it does, dang. There you go. So we created 3 of those, and they didn't destroy themselves, even though they inherited from our singleton guy. So what we can do to prevent this, remember, what we're trying to do is set up a system that won't let us forget to do things. We're trying to set up ways that will prevent us from running into things later on that are going to leave us scratching our head for hours wondering why something isn't working. And you should always be thinking about this. Don't try to get around errors. Try to bring errors to you. So if you think of something that can make your game mess up or go wrong, implement a way to if it is going wrong, it tells you it's going wrong. Don't try to avoid the problem. Don't say, oh, I don't want to know if there's an error by trying to do like if checks. If this variable doesn't exist, then ignore this piece of code. Don't do that. Bring the error to the forefront saying, hey, dude, you messed up. You need to fix something, and then just close the game. And I'm going to show you how to do this. So our room manager, we forgot to do event inherited, which will destroy ourselves if there's more than one, okay? So we forgot to do that. Now, how can we make GameMaker tell us that we forgot to call that, okay? Well, we can add a check inside of our game initializer, okay? Remember, a game initializer is what's going to be in charge of creating these objects. So we're not going to place these objects in our room by hand. We're going to place this game initializer and let it take care of everything for us. So the code that we can write to do this is we could say if, bear with me, I haven't went over this yet, I'm just going to type it out, variable exists singleton, how does the variable exists? Variable instance exists, and we're going to give we have to give an object to check to see if that variable exists in, and that's going to be our controller that we're currently creating, and I'll show you why we're going to use an array for managers in a second. So we'd have to do a variable instance exists input manager, and we have to specify the name of the variable we want to check for. We're going to name a variable singleton, okay? And we're going to say if this variable doesn't exist, okay, then we know we have an issue. Well, it doesn't exist at all yet, but I'm going to explain why in a second. So we're checking our input manager to see if the variable singleton exists. And if we go to our input manager, it does not exist because we didn't initialize it. There's not a variable called singleton here. Or in the step event, it's not created. So that's of course going to be false. But in our singleton object, in our create event, we can do singleton, doesn't matter what we initialize this to, equals true, okay? And this is in our singleton parent. And now when we call event inherited, it's going to go to our singleton create event, and it's going to set singleton to equal true for this object. So now the variable will exist, event inherited, okay? So now we can say if variable doesn't exist in our input manager, we give it the variable to check for, then we want to show a message to our player or to us because we're the one making the game. We want to know if something's not set up right. So we say input manager does not call its parent create event. This may cause, oh, I'll full screen this, issues. And you can see we can give as much detail as we want here. So a week down the line when we forget to do something, it's going to tell us exactly how to fix it, exactly what's wrong. So now when I start this, we shouldn't get any errors because we're doing event inherited. Okay, we're not getting any errors for that one, but what happens if we do it for our room manager? So we did the same code, I copy and pasted, but now we're checking for our room manager. And if you remember, room manager does not call event inherited. There we go. Input manager does not call its parents create event. This may cause issues. So now, anytime that we make a new manager and we don't set it up correctly, it's going to let us know that it's not set up correctly instead of leaving us guessing. Because you saw before, or you see now, we actually have three, what is it? Room managers in our room because it's not set up correctly. So the singleton isn't working how it should be. And this is telling us right now that something's wrong. Oh, it's saying input manager. Oops, it should say room manager, guys. So if I go to the game initializer, it should say room manager. Room manager does not call its parents create event. This may cause issues. So room manager doesn't call its create event. This may cause issues, and it is causing issues because it's allowing 3 of them to exist on accident. Well, so now we know when something's wrong. So let's go fix it. So let's go into our room manager, and we know what to do. We need to call event inherited. Now I hit play, and room manager destroyed itself. The second room manager destroyed itself, or the third one, technically. So now we only have 1. Because that message told us, hey, you didn't set this up correctly, we went back to the create event, we set it up correctly, it fixed our problems. Now we didn't get left guessing, right? And it was as simple as going to the singleton, making a variable that only the singleton's going to create. And then when our child object, our input manager or our room manager, since the parent is a singleton, when you call this event inherited, it now has that singleton variable. And when we're initializing these objects in our load room, it does these checks. Now, it's really annoying to write out this variable instance exists for every manager you want to have. So we're going to set up an array, and we're just going to say var managers, and this is just an array, equals 0. Or we're just going to do 0 equals input manager var. Let's just do, we don't need to use var because we're going to destroy our object. Okay, then we're going to do manager 1 equals room manager. Okay, and we're going to do a for loop. So we're just going to do for I equals 0, I is less than manager. We do array length 1D. Yep, this gets how many values are in this array. Manager, so it gets us the length. It's going to return 2. So this is going to return 2 at this point because there's only 2 values in this array. So for each of those values in the array, we're going to execute this code. All right. Oops. And now we can't hard code input manager. We're just going to put manager I. So the manager at that index, I. And then we can get rid of all this code down here. And we can't hard code input manager, obviously, because this is going to cycle through all of our managers that we have up here. So what we're going to do for the string is we're going to do object get name. Here, let me maximize this code for you. Sorry, guys. Object get name plus, and then we're going to say, man, this video could go on a while. I have a lot of stuff I can go over, but it's all right. If you want to leave, that's fine. The videos are going to be uploaded. You can watch it. I'm going to go through a lot of cool stuff. Please watch this video. It's going to be a lot of useful stuff that's going to change the way you use GameMaker. I promise you that. All right, so object get name manager. So this is doing a show message. We're outputting the name of the object, whatever one it's on at the current time, and it's giving us an error basically, right? If it isn't initialized correctly. If you haven't set it up right, it's going to tell you. So now we should be able to play, and it's going to create all 3 objects, or both objects, and it didn't give us any errors. Okay, that's the good thing. Awesome. So now we have our basic framework set up. Now, one more thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a little bit of error message handling. So I'm going to create a new folder and call it error handling. This is scripts, and I'm going to create a new script and call it scr error. Let's do fatal. Okay. And I'm just going to cut and paste this show message code. And you'll understand why I'm doing this in a second. It's actually pretty cool. So instead of this, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to say arguments 0. So now we're setting up an error handling system. And we're going to do show message, and it's going to take in a parameter, an argument. And it's also going to take in, we'll just do object. Yeah, it's just going to take in object get name, object index. And then we're going to add this thing. So this is going to tell you what object called this script, basically. It's going to put a semicolon, and then it's going to take in a message that you give the script and output that. And we named it fatal. So that means after the user is prompted with a message, we're going to shut the game down. Let's say you have a full screen game that only takes, you have to go to an exit button on the screen, and it's super annoying, and you don't want to wait for the game to finish initializing. At this point, if this is thrown, then it'll show you a message, you click OK, the game ends. You don't have to worry about anything else. So now we've created a script error fatal, and I'm going to just duplicate it, Control D. And I'm going to say script error warning. And this is going to do the exact same thing, but it's not going to end the game, okay? Awesome. So now inside of our original code, we can call script error. And this is something that we want to fix right away. If you ignore it, it's probably not going to work because you're missing one of your managers, right? So we're going to do a script fatal, and I'm just going to do the same error message, okay, that I had before. So what was I doing? It was object get index manager I. And I know this is taking a while, guys, and I know you're probably getting bored. We're going to go over some AI stuff pretty soon, though. It's going to be cool. But it's really important. If you follow these steps and you set up your initial game like this, it's going to save you a ton of headache later on, and it's going to give you a good groundwork. And I have a lot of experience in this, so this is a good way of doing it. Okay, awesome. So now let's see what happens. Let's go ahead and mess one of our things up. Let's take away our event inherited code from our room manager. Run play. Now we should get that error, that fatal error, right? Fatal error. Oh, object get index. Object. Did I do that wrong? Object. Oh, yeah, object get name. Object get name. That's what we wanted. Let's hit play. And we should get this fatal error message. Oh, awesome. So now it tells you what object called this message. Game initializer. Yep, that's the one that called it. And then it tells you your message that you gave it. And you click OK. Oh, it didn't end the game. I'm confused. Oh, fatal I took away. Game end. Okay, so the fatal script I didn't have the game end in. I took it out of the wrong script. Awesome. So now it should end. It'll show you the message. Game stops. Game ends. Go fix your issue. Right? So now we go fix our issue. Room manager. We give it the event inherited. Now it's a singleton once again. Awesome. So now we have our objects created. Let's go ahead and destroy our game initializer, right? Okay. And let's also move to the next room after initialization. So room, go to next. Awesome. Sweet. So this is where all of our code happens here. All of our loading of the game, you might have another object just for loading. You do instance create load manager, loads your game, whatever. You do all your game initialization right here. I usually have managers like called data cache. That's where I store like a lot of variables, like data structures and stuff that I need. You don't store data in the player. That's against the single responsibility pattern. There's no reason to store a million variables inside your player object. So create other controllers to store these variables. So our game gets initialized right here. You might actually, for cameras, for the game camera, I initialize that on the player. So on the player's create event, I say instance create camera. And this always ensures the camera gets created after your player, since it's usually following your player. That's a good way to do it. But anyway, your initialization stuff goes here. If you want to add a new manager, it's as simple as doing this. Manager2 equals new manager. Just do that for any manager you have. You don't have to do anything else in your game to initialize a new controller object except this. And this will tell you if it's not set up correctly as well. And I'll demonstrate that in a moment. So we have our initial setup. It's going to move. Oh, let's do instance destroy. So it's going to, let's not. Let's just do room go to next. We don't need to destroy it because it's going to destroy itself when we go to the next room. So initialize our game, go to the next room. This is our loading screen. So let's hit play. It should go to our loading screen. Then it should move to our play area. And it did, in fact. But we're getting an error. There's no input manager in our play area, but we just initialized it, right? We initialized our input manager in our loading screen. Then it went to the next room, and it doesn't exist, right? Okay, so the reason is we need to set these objects to persistent, okay? So we just go to our singleton. We set it to persistent. And I actually wanted to experiment with this before. Theoretically, the child objects should inherit that persistent property from their parent. If it's like other languages or like how it should be. Okay, it didn't work. We tried. Awesome. So when you set up a new manager, now you have to have another thing to do. So you set up your input manager. You need to set it to persistent. And then you need to do it for your room manager as well. But we're going to implement another type safety or another safety check in our code. Okay. So now we forgot to set our room manager to persistent. Let me explain what persistent is. So persistent, what it does when you check this box, once an object is created, it is not destroyed. No matter if your room changes in your game or whatever happens in your game, it's never destroyed unless explicitly told to do so. So unless you say instance destroy on the room manager or on the persistent object, it stays alive throughout all rooms, okay? So once I set persistent to the input manager, you'll see now when it transitions room, we're not going to get the issue anymore. It's going to load our room just fine. Awesome. Because it initialized in our loading screen, we went to the next room, but it didn't get destroyed because it's persistent and it stays alive. So we go on to the next room after this play area, it's going to stay alive again. Then we go on to the next room after that play area, it's going to stay alive throughout your entire game. You never have to worry about putting, like, let's say we make a new room. Let me just make a new room. So I'm gonna do create. Let's do create room. We're gonna call this play area 2, and I'm not gonna put any controller objects in here, guys. So I made play area 2, and I'm gonna drag like my player and enemy. So this is gonna differentiate a little bit more. I'm gonna put 3 enemies in here. And let's make sure that's the room we're going to after the loading screen. And remember, I didn't put any controller objects in that room, okay? But it's still going to work. We're not going to get any errors. There you go. And just to show you that all the objects are still there. So now we have our room manager, right? Well, let's add some code to our room manager. Let's say on, let's see, key pressed. Let's do control. Let's just say room, go to next, okay? So remember, let me open up the play area and go to instance creation order. This shows you all the instances in the room. There's not a controller in there, is there? Nope. Let's go to play area 1. There's not a controller object in that room either. And there's only one instance called game initializer in the loading screen. But all of these objects are being created correctly. So we hit play. Boom. So we're good. Now if we hit control, our room manager should exist in here. So we should go on to the next room, right? Oh. What did we forget to do? We forgot to set room manager to persistent. All right, so how are we going to prevent forgetting? Remember, we don't want to be able to forget. We want our game to be like, hey, you forgot, okay? So we should be able to go here and have a second check now. Let's throw another fatal error if our object's not persistent. So let's do if manager.i, the current manager we just created, dot persistent. We might have to actually save. This is going to get object index. Is there a property object is, nope, object persistent, nope. Okay, so we're going to have to save this instance we create with an I. I'm just going to, oh wait, we can't save with an I. New manager. This is going to make it really apparent. And what we could do is we created that object. We could say if new manager is not equal to, right, new manager dot persistent is not equal to true, then we can throw a new error and we can say this manager is not persistent. Game will close. Awesome. So now we're checking if this new object that just got created is persistent or not. This is going to let us know if we forgot. So remember, our room manager is not persistent, so it's not going to save across different rooms. So I'm going to hit play. Oh, it's telling us right now, room manager. This manager is not persistent. The game will close. Didn't close the game. What do we do? Confused. Game initializer, error fatal, game end. Okay. That's actually weird that it didn't end the game. I hope someone has a reason for me why. Let me try one more time. It should have closed the game. Room manager, the game will close. Okay. I'm gonna have to figure that out another time. It should be game end, right? That's really weird. Well, I guess what we could do is we could say else. Here, I'll just put, for now, whatever. It's supposed to close the game. I don't know why it's not working. It worked in my last project, so it's really weird. I'll figure it out another time and I'll let you guys know, okay? But you get the point. We're getting the message. It's telling us that something's broken, okay? And the room go to next is happening, even though we called game end, which is super weird. Okay, so you get the point. It's telling us, hey, this is wrong. So we need to go to our room manager, set it to persistent. Cool, we did it. And we hit play. No errors. Went to the next room. We hit control, went to the next room because our object exists and it's persistent through all of our rooms. Okay, so what did we do? Well, how do I explain this in simple terms if people just came in? We created one object that has a sole responsibility of initializing controllers for your game, okay? Or managers that control like certain aspects of the game. Like you see, we have an input manager and a room manager, okay? So this takes the responsibility off of you of putting those objects in your rooms and making sure they're created in the correct order, okay? So what we've done is made it to where you have to come in here, you go to your game initializer, and let's go ahead and make a new, let's go through the process of how easy it is to set up a new manager that will work throughout your entire game now. So I'm going to create an object, I'm going to call it combat manager, okay? And we want this to be created at the beginning of our game in our load screen. So we know we created Combat Manager. We're going to go to our game initializer, and now we're going to add Combat Manager. 2 equals Combat Manager as one of the objects we want to be created at the beginning of our game. Now, we forgot to do everything as far as setting it up goes, okay? So let's go ahead and hit play and see what happens. First of all, game initializer. Combat does not call its parents create event. Combat manager. This manager is not persistent. Game will close. It didn't close. Whatever. I'm done with it today. It should close because it says game end. It literally says it right there. Anyway. I think it actually caches this call, and then if this call exists, it does this. So you could fix this by having an error flag that you could set to true, and then say if error equals false, then execute this code, okay? But we're not gonna do that right now, okay? Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, so we created this object, this new manager called Combat Manager. This is where our AI will originate from. We didn't even set its parent. So we should tell the player if the parent's not set. This could be a warning, because maybe you have an object you don't want to inherit from singleton for some reason. So we could just do warning. Script error warning. This wouldn't destroy your game. Oh, let's keep all that. And then we simply do... Come on. Warning. We simply do this object does not inherit from singleton. Now we'll get this error, and we could do if not object is ancestor. You can actually check if an object has a parent of a certain type. So you give it the child, which is manager I, and its parent that you're checking for is singleton. And we should get this error now. This warning, this object does into inherit. This object does not inherit from singleton. So it's telling you that it doesn't inherit from singleton. It's telling you that it doesn't call its parent's create event. It's telling you that it's not persistent. So it told you everything that's wrong right now. So you go fix it. So we go, well, we need to set its parents to, wait, that's singleton. That's not where we're at. Combat Manager. Let's set its parent to singleton. We need to make it persistent, and we need to have it call inherited event inherited. Awesome. And what do we have now? We have a working system that didn't break. And it went to a next room that doesn't exist. Don't worry. But so what did we go over? We ran an hour. So tomorrow or another day, the next day probably, I'll do another video that's going to go over building the, I know it said I was going to do it. It's going to go over building the AI group controller, basically a system that allows you to, instead of your enemies talking to each other, it's going to act as a controller that kind of, it keeps track of all the enemies that are in combat, and it's going to tell them how to interact with each other. So they aren't talking to each other. The controller, you have this director type, that's why I call it as a director, that directs the enemy's AI, and we're going to go over that stuff next time. And the reason we had to do this stuff first is because I'm going to be using the singleton pattern, and I'm going to be using this stuff for making that stuff work. So I really want you guys to get an understanding of why this works and why it's important. And I've been implementing these methods of doing these checks and stuff for all kinds of stuff. As you can see, it's really easy to add more managers now. It tells you exactly what's wrong. You have all these messages. And if you don't know why to use managers, please Google single responsibility pattern, okay? Every object in your game should have one single responsibility, okay? So yeah, I've went over it a few times. Input manager is responsible for handling input. Room manager is responsible for handling room transitions. I know most game maker developers, they put everything into their player. And it becomes a huge mess. This directly lets you see exactly where everything is. The example I gave earlier is inside your player. I'm getting my input from input manager. So if I want to change these values, like let's say you're using global.h input, how do you know where this is set? It's not apparent. Global, it doesn't matter. It's set from everywhere. And that's not good. If you want to change this variable, you can't. And it actually, when your game gets bigger, having even local variables just for the player like this can get annoying. If you have a million of them, it's hard to find where to go. So when you separate stuff out like this, you know exactly where it's at. I just got to go to my input manager. It's obvious. It's going to be assigned here, right? Actually, you should do h input equals 0, v input. There you go. So it's initialized right here. So single responsibility pattern, guys. Super important. Look it up. Start separating your stuff into objects. Start using parents for everything. For if there can be multiple types of things. So like I have the singleton parent. In my most recent project, I had a collision parent that all blocks inherited from. And then above that, I had a line of sight blocking parent. So anything that could block like an enemy's line of sight would inherit from that. Because there were some objects that I didn't want to be collidable from the player, but I did want them to block the enemy's sight, their field of view. So I made a sight blocking parent, and then the collision parent inherited from that. And subsequently, all the blocks that could be collided with were also sight blockers. So use this idea of having parents and having children. It's really important. All right, so I'm going to do the next video probably tomorrow or the next day. I'm going to go ahead. I only have a couple of viewers now. I'm going to go ahead and take some questions if you guys have any questions, especially about what I talked about, or I know I haven't been around a while. So yeah, if y'all have anything, ask away. If not, just say you don't have any questions. But yeah, I'll go ahead and take questions. And again, really watch it. If you didn't understand this video, I want you to go through and implement this stuff and go through the same kind of errors I did. Watch this video again. I promise you it's going to save you when you start actually making a large game, okay? Because this sets up everything, okay? Like I said, you create a new room. As long as you have that loading screen as your first room in the game, or you can do a main menu, and then when you hit start game, then it transitions to the loading screen, and then it transitions to your game, whatever you want to do. But if your loading screen comes before your main game, you'll never have anything to worry about. You don't have to worry about placing controllers in here, checking to make sure the instance creation order is correct. And then every room you create, you have to do that, or you can do like parent rooms and stuff, but this takes care of everything. You simply make your new manager, you go into your game initializer, and you put it right there. You just make a new manager right here, and it's done. And if you forget to do something correctly, then it's going to tell you. I do now, yes. I made it for my last one, and I found that this basically works for any type of game. I have core managers that I use. For every game, I have an input manager, I have a room manager, I have a data cache. Sometimes I'll separate the data caches out. For example, I'll give you one example of how I use a data cache and how you can use it. Let's go ahead and this is a project that I'm working on, and I'm working with the team. It's going to be awesome, actually. And you'll see in here, I implemented all this stuff as well. And this is what we're going to be going over the next day. I have an AI director. Again, this is checking the object is ancestor, all this stuff. It's making sure that everything's set up correctly. So if I forget something, it's going to tell me, okay? And you can kind of see that right here. But anyway, for like the data cache, let's go to my controllers. So I have a data cache object. Oh, that's not what I wanted. So a data cache is something like this. Like I have a ton of data here, and this is just the beginning of it, okay? There's going to be a lot more. But do you think it'd be better to store all this stuff in the player object? Or separate out the variables and store them in different objects? I might make separate data caches later, and maybe they'll all inherit from data cache. But separating out the variables allows you a lot more flexibility, and it's a lot easier. For example, if I go to my player, if I were to have all that stuff inside the player's create event with all he has already, and this is just the beginning of this game's development, imagine a year from now in development how crowded this create event would be and how many variables I'd have to look through to get to certain things. So separate your stuff out from the beginning, even if it seems trivial. Just do it. It makes a huge difference. And then, yeah, so you see my combat director, and then that's my parent one. I need to separate these into groups, and then I have a type of combat director, okay? So when I have this combat director, it calls event inherited that creates a list of actors, because you're going to register actors with it. And then it sets is a combat director. It just sets it to true. I just do this to include an extra type safety. And then this calls event inherited from, oh shoot. This calls event inherited from singleton. So it actually is a singleton as well. So there can't be two of these combat directors in here. But more accurately, there can't be more than one SG combat director. But I could have another type of combat director that could exist at the same time, okay? But if two of them try to get created, then it'll destroy itself. So you don't accidentally have two directors trying to direct AI at the same time. It'd be messing everything up and you wouldn't know why. Like, why is my stuff not working correctly? So implement safety to counter that stuff, okay? And that's kind of the main point, is stop trying to suppress errors, okay? You're getting errors for a reason. Make more errors, or just show a message. Like, be like, wow, if I'm setting this stuff up and I don't do it correctly later on, that could be an issue. Well, make it to where it's going to let you know if you don't do it correctly, okay? But yeah, definitely have a template set up. I might actually release a template. Also, I made this pretty cool tool I might be releasing pretty soon if I can get some of the bugs working. There's only one bug. It actually resizes your entire project. So we came into an issue with this game. I'll go ahead and show you how many sprites there are. So check out all these sprites. There's hundreds and hundreds of sprites, okay? Just take my word for it. There's a lot of sprites. And so we came in this issue where we had, we wanted to scale the sprites down. We had them way too large, okay? They were like 448 pixels by 448 pixels, okay? But they were drawn at 16 by 16, but we scaled them up for the scaling on our game, and we decided it was too large. So we have hundreds of these sprites, and we have rooms already made, and I know you know how much of a pain it is to resize sprites and reset their bounding boxes and stuff. I actually wrote a little program that you just point it to your GameMaker project folder, and it resizes all the sprites, it resizes the rooms, it resizes the collision boxes, it resets the origins, and it takes 30 seconds, and your entire game is scaled. It scales the images and everything. So you can actually, if you want to scale your game up, you can scale your entire game up. Even if you have rooms built, it scales the tile sets, it scales the, it moves the objects to the correct positions depending on the scale, does everything. Yeah, I actually have thought about going back. I think instead of I'm still continuing on that platformer because I promised a lot of stuff and I'm gonna end up doing it. But what I am going to do is I have a couple game project ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys, since you guys stuck around a while, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a sneak peek of this game, all right? And I'm about 5 days into it. The team picked me up not too long ago. So they've been working on it a while. So yeah, we have this platformer. It's kind of Castlevania-esque. And yeah, there's not too much to it in my build right now. There's basic combos. You can do in-air combo swipes, jump through platforms, and they have like this move. Yeah, basically I've been just working on getting them. Oh yeah, we have rolls too. It's kind of cool. So you can actually roll. And then you can mix combos in. It also works on the gamepad controller. Yeah, I haven't implemented the AI completely yet, but yeah, it's pretty neat, really. Feels pretty good. I think I just got stuck on this wall. I don't know how. That was interesting. Okay. But yeah, you can roll, and yeah, it's pretty neat. So that's kind of what I've been working on lately. And then I also have another project that I'm working on, and there's not quite as many graphics for it yet, so I'm not going to show it. It's actually being done in Unity, which is kind of cool. So I might be going over that soon as well. But yeah, this game is going to be awesome. I promise you that. It's feeling pretty smooth so far. The animations our artists are awesome. They're really, really good. I could show you like some of the other rooms, maybe. Not that one. Yeah, you can't see it too well. I wonder if it'll let me play this one. I haven't actually tried this room yet in my build of the game, because like I said, there's another build of the game. We're kind of doing a couple parallel builds and seeing which one plays better. And then we'll decide. Yeah, I didn't get everything set up right for this room, but yeah, there's actually like rain and stuff in the game, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's pretty neat. And let's see, there's another area that's like a small dungeon. And we have like an arena, another arena, and then like another arena. It's kind of cool. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, it's awesome. So I'm learning a lot from these last couple projects I've been doing. So I have a lot of good YouTube tutorial stuff for Game Maker that really hasn't ever been touched on before in anything I've seen. So hopefully I can start making videos soon. But I think I'm going to close it down. If y'all have questions, ask in the next 30 to 45 seconds, and I'll answer them. I can give y'all kind of I might open up the Unity project as well, so I could show you that. But I appreciate that. I'll try to make more soon, I promise. Like I also started a Patreon, but I don't feel like I have enough time to actually go through with it right now, so I'm kind of holding off on using that. And then hopefully I can get back into the videos. They take a lot of time though. If it ever gets to a point where I could do it full time, I will, because I do love making them, but they take. When I was putting one out a day, I only had I had a lot of free time, and I started full-time work and stuff now, so I don't have as much time. Did my Unity open? What happened? Did I hit cancel? Not really positive. Looks like another, okay. I don't see it open. Hello? But yeah, I have a lot of cool AI stuff I'm gonna do. But I really need to introduce more low-level stuff on the channel. because a lot of the stuff that has to do with AI is using like some pretty advanced techniques. Like I have to introduce these design patterns, so I'm going to have to make a video over kind of what I went over today. A singleton pattern, single responsibility pattern. So and then start going over a couple algorithms before I can really get into the AI stuff. And when I get into that, it's going to be really, really cool. Yeah, I guess it's kind of, the reason that I guess I'm kind of unique is most of the time when people get into hardcore computer science and they actually start getting really experienced with programming, they move on to Unity. They don't like GameMaker anymore because, to be honest, it sucks to program in GameMaker after you've experienced the rest of the world. So I don't have the character implemented yet, but yeah, so this is going to be kind of a how do you say it? It's going to be Limbo-esque type game, kind of similar to that Inside feel, but with a little bit more fantasy. There's more fantasy to it. So right now we have the parallax, and you can see we have the bumpy ground collisions, and this is one of the things I like about Unity quite a bit, is to make that bumpy ground collision, it was really easy. For example, let's go to scene. Okay, so I go to my scene view, right? This is like the room editor in GameMaker. Now, I don't have to make sprites for the collisions for the game, okay? You see this line? I literally hit Edge Collider. I just added a component, Edge Collider. Made a line from one side of the map to the other side of the map, okay? And now I can add points, and I can make this as bumpy as I want. And this is my collision mask. I'm making it in real time. I don't have to have sprites. I just make a collision mask, and I can add as many points as I want to make this as accurate to the ground as I want it. And this is just one of the few things about Unity that makes it awesome. Like, it really is pretty cool. But I'm still in love with GameMaker, so that's why I still do a lot of stuff in GameMaker. But yeah, it's just that simple to, I'm just adding points. Can make the player go down right there. Make it the curve, and I hit play, and it's good to go. Pretty cool. Yeah, so the simple stuff, I would go over it, but there's 10 years of GameMaker tutorials that cover the really basic stuff, and that's all that a lot of YouTubers know how to do is the basic stuff. So I try to bring something different to the scene, I guess, the GameMaker scene, by explaining the more computer science-y stuff. Because as I said, most developers in GameMaker, when they actually learn a lot about computer science and about programming and touch other languages, they move on. They just kind of forget about GameMaker. But I've used it. It's what got me into programming. I love it. So now that I know more about computer science and the core concepts and have a lot of experience, I want to like share that and make the GameMaker community better, you know, by like educating you guys on stuff that other people don't talk about, like design patterns in GameMaker. Let me link you guys real quick to, it's going to be pretty hard for you to apply in GameMaker, but I'm going to link this. So go to this website, and these are game design patterns. Most of it's talking about like Unity or other programming languages, but just read it, go through it, read it. Some of it has to do with like actually making a game engine. You can kind of shove that stuff to the side, but you can see things like the factory pattern, the builder pattern, the singleton pattern, different patterns that you can use. And it talks about inheritance and stuff. Is kind of what I went over today. So really get into inheritance. In GameMaker, it's different from what it shows kind of in that. In other languages, a class is just a chunk of code. that represents an object, okay? In GameMaker, we have the same thing. We have a chunk of code behind the scenes, and the reason that we can attach a graphic to it is because that chunk of code contains a variable that just holds basically a reference to an image, okay? And that's all that GameMaker is doing for us, is kind of automatically assigning those variables so we don't have to write it out in code. So when we say select sprite, click a sprite, we're saying, hey, set our sprite index. Remember, that's a variable inside our object. We're saying, hey, set our sprite index to this sprite. That's all we're doing. Behind the scenes, GameMaker just has a chunk of code that's called a class, and it contains variables. That's all an object is, and it's a piece of code that contains data that's only relevant to itself, basically, like it's encapsulated in itself. So I can give you a quick example for the 3 guys that are here. If I were to open up IntelliJ, so if I were to have a Java program and I wanted to make an object, I will make a GameMaker object in Java in about a minute and a half, and I'll show you exactly what it is. Okay, so come on, why is my computer so slow? Sorry, my friend wanted to play. Okay, so let me just make a new Java class. We'll call this object, okay? So this is a GameMaker object right here, right? This is what it looks like behind the scenes in GameMaker. You create a new object. This is what it does. It creates an object, but it fills in a ton of variables. You have sprite index equals, and yeah, I have to give it a data type. Let's just say string sprite index equals, and this is maybe a link, a file path. So we have like GameMaker dir s player object. GameMaker does some linking stuff with like it makes references to stuff using like various like letters and stuff. Don't worry about it. Basically, it's a link to where an object's located. So GameMaker set our sprite index. So we have image index is built in as well. Our image index is equal to, let's say, 1, right? It's an integer. And well, in GameMaker, everything is a double, actually. So it's 1.0, right? And then what else do we have? We have a private double. We have image number equals, maybe GameMaker has a function that goes into this object and gets how many images there are. So whatever, it's a function. We'll just set it to 10. Then we have private double image speed. It's defaulted to 1. Then we have, I can copy all this. We have image angle, image X scale, image Y scale, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on, right? So the list goes on and on. Behind the scenes, this is all a GameMaker object is, right? And then it has stuff like an update event, right? So you have a public. Public just means other, like, see, I have these other classes. They can access this as well. That's all public means. If you set it to private, it means this stuff can only be accessed from inside of this object, right? So basically, GameMaker, everything is public because you can call anything from everywhere, basically. So we have public. Let's say we have to have a step event, so we do public void step, right? So now we have a step event, and the step event is run from, let's say we have like a main, all right? I'm gonna get rid of this stuff. The main is where our application gets created. It's the beginning of the application. And all we do is we set up like a thread, basically, or something that repeats a loop. So we do like while true. This is going to just loop forever until we set it to false. And then while true, we say, well, first we create our new object. Don't worry about this. Object player equals new object, whatever. So then we just do player dot step. And now every step that our computer takes inside this while loop, it's just an infinite loop. It's calling the step event. And this would actually be like a list of objects, all the objects in our game. And then this would do for each object in our game, it calls the step event. And that's all that's happening. So we have the step, and then we have like a draw event, of course. Then we have the create event, which the create event in Java is just when you initialize the object. So you do like a public. This is called a, a constructor. This is called a constructor. So you see how public and then the object name, right? And this is what happens. This is the create event, basically. So this is what happens when you say new object right here. It calls that constructor, okay? Just calls this code. So this is your create event in GameMaker. So you have your create event, you have your step event, you have your draw event. And the code that you write goes inside of these events, right? And the variables that you create basically come up here. So there's a ton of built-in variables, and there are methods or functions, or events, as we call them in GameMaker. That's all that it is. And you can see why GameMaker is kind of inefficient, because there's, I think, 100 of these built-in variables. So anytime you make a new object, it stores all this stuff in memory. It's not very efficient. Because in Java, I could make a class. I'll just make a class on here. Class points. And look at that. I've created a new object that only holds 2 variables, which takes no memory at all. And in GameMaker, we're forced to hold like 100 variables at the least. And the GameMaker is going to run all these events every step all the time. When in Java, I made a point that contains 2 data values, and it doesn't have anything it's running every step, and it doesn't have a bunch of built-in stuff. And that sums up kind of, I think the biggest downfall in GameMaker is there's not an option to just create an object that only has like a create event, right? You can initialize some like data like X and Y. You could just set a couple values. And why is that cool? Because then you could do for int I equals 0, I is less than 100, I plus plus. And then you could say new objects, or new point with I and I as its X and Y values, right? So int why isn't it? Cannot be applied, point and point cannot be applied. Let's do new point equals, oh, I know why. Because you need to do you need to make its constructor, its create event, right? So its create event just takes in int x, int y, and then you could set this dot x equals x, this dot y equals y. There you go. So it has a create event. The point has a create event, right? And I created 100 of them. So now there's 100 points that contain only 2 values. In GameMaker, if I did this, I created, I needed to store 2 values, and I created 2,000 variables. And in this case, I only created 200 variables, or 200,000 variables in GameMaker, I think, something like that. Whatever. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. You kind of get the point. This is what an object is. It's just an encapsulation of data, okay? So in GameMaker, that's all an object is a place to store a bunch of data, and it has these events that execute. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking. It's pretty late. Thank you guys for watching. I'm really glad you did. Hopefully I'll be able to do another one. Next time we're going to talk more about artificial intelligence. And hopefully I can get you guys some more videos out soon. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and if you have any questions, I try to answer my comments. I've been slower lately, but yeah, anytime. So I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Thank you, man. Thank you for watching. Gotta exit somehow.